Yo guys, and welcome to another video. This will for sure be my longest project, but I really wanted to make something like this to cover close to all top lane matchups you might end up facing as Aurora. If I end up missing a champion, let me know down in the comments and I'll try to answer. For credibility, I finished 1k LP with Aurora being my most played last season and currently I'm sitting at 700 LP. Also for this video, I'll have less overall cuts since it will take too much time and sadly there's no subtitles. Hopefully I speak fluently enough that everything I say is understandable. I'll have a screenshot of the full tier list down below. Make sure you subscribe for more content like this and of course like the video. I appreciate all of you. A few rules before we start. This tier list is primarily focused around laning, not so much how we perform versus these champions outside of it. I will of course mention a thing or two outside of lane when mentioning some of the champions, but just so you know, your main win condition outside of lane is to always have an impact in teamfights, so finding a good middle ground how you catch waves and then go in teamfight and find good angles and find the right target is up to you and it's what makes a good Aurora player. But also laning is the place where you get to show your 1v1 prowess and also build up a lead from it. I will give every possible room page for each champion so people can use this video as a reference, and I'm also going to give some advice on how to deal with these matchups. Lastly, before we start, let me talk about the tiers a little bit. From top to bottom, unplayable. I'm gonna put the worst matchups here. Basically any champion that is almost impossible for you to do anything against. And any champion that is here, it is worth banning. Next up, opponent favorite, and any champion that I deem that has the edge over in the laning phase. Fully skill dependent is a 50-50 matchup, so anyone can win, it's up in the air and the better player is gonna prevail. Aurora favorite means, well yeah, the name describes it. Aurora is likely to win this one. And the easy tier goes even a step further. It's absolutely Aurora favorite, and if you want to play Aurora and you see this champion that is in this role being picked, you should pick Aurora if you want to. I will also put some champions in the haven't played enough tier. There are some matchups I just don't have enough experience against because people don't end up picking them against me because I blind pick Aurora most of the time and they tend to pick the harder matchups, and that's totally reasonable. So with all of that out of the way, I hope you enjoy and let's get started. So first of all, Aatrox. You have a choice between two room pages, either go for Airy plus Precision or Electrocute plus Precision. If you're not sure whether you can pull off this matchup, go for the Airy route. Reason is, it makes everything a lot easier. But the thing is, Electrocute is more than enough, and I like to go for it because I don't find this matchup nearly as hard as it should be, and that's why I just like to scale better using Electrocute. Some people might struggle in this matchup, but the idea is you're a lot stronger than him early on because Aatrox actually needs a few levels before he can start doing anything. Early levels, take control over bushes and utilize your strength. You easily outtrade him as long as you don't walk into his Q sweet spots. Later on in lane, make sure you stand behind minions, so you never give him a clear shot on you with his W ability. Make sure he never gets any long extended trades and keep your W most of the time exactly for the situation if you end up getting hit by his Inferno chains, because it's hard to escape it otherwise. Also, sometimes what they do is they go for the Comet rune. It means that he's looking for a more poking playstyle. Pay attention to when he's going in for a fast E plus Q, he will always look to dash on you when it's available. Aatrox will go into the Aurora favorite role because she should win on average. Next up, Gnar. Go for the Airy plus Precision page. Even though he's a range champion, he's pretty weak early against most other ones like Jayce and Quinn. Aurora is no exception. When trading, weave in as many auto attacks in between abilities. Together with Airy, you should be able to beat him in an auto attack exchange. Make sure you respect his Mega Gnar because when transforming, he can easily find an all-in angle on you and even 100 to 0 you. Don't stay near walls when he's about to do so. Also, take note that he's tankier when he is in Mega form, since he gets more HP and resistances. Also, when he goes into Mega Gnar, he gets HP and he gets to keep that in mini form, so he does technically have built-in sustain, which is worth mentioning. Gnar is a little bit more difficult to deal with than Aatrox, so he's gonna go in the fully skill dependent role. Next up, Gangplank. Always go for Comet and Domination. Surprisingly for a melee champion, after he hits Shen, he can actually outpoke you. Take control of bushes level 1 and do not face check since he can start barrels, and if he did, respect it and don't ever let him hit you and the minions at the same time since it lets him play for level 2 and potentially priority. Level 1 to 5, you can force trades even if you walk into his Q range, as long as you keep the lane pushed into him because it lets you reset if you mess up. The longer the lane goes, the more you have to forfeit trades and only go for E-poke. Reason is he actually outtrades you once he gets his first back off. Luckily for you though, as long as you keep outranging him with E, you don't have to elaborate. Gangplank will go in the opponent favorite tier because Gangplank is actually very strong in the laning phase, utilizing Shen very well, and he can match Aurora very easily in the poking aspect. But outside of laning phase, he is actually weaker because he is very mechanically intensive. So Aurora can actually use this in her advantage and have it as a win condition. Gangplanks will have almost no impact compared to her. Illaoi, Hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. Go for Electrocute plus Precision or Airy plus Precision. If you think you're gonna have a good time because you're very acquainted with the matchup, go for Electrocute. If you find it difficult, go for Airy. She's pretty straightforward. The most important thing is to not let her hit you with her E. You have a very big advantage in this, which is your small hitbox. Bully her as much as possible in the laning phase, since later on she'll become an immovable object on the side lane. You need to out-impact her through team fights. Some people might be surprised, but she's gonna go in the easy role. Reason is, she's actually not very hard once you get used to dodging her E. Next up, Irelia. Most people in my Discord server already know what I think about her, which is that I don't think about her. She's always banned in my games. It's not just because of Aurora though, she counters my whole champion pool. And in general, I think Irelia is the most unfair champion when it comes to laning. You make one mistake and now you're frozen on, and then you need to pray your jungle comes and helps you, or you have to do it yourself, but you're probably gonna die in the process. If you're top lane Aurora enjoyer, my advice is just ban this champion and do not get a headache. It is by far the worst matchup because of the dynamic between the two champions. But let's say you leave her open because you want to test your skill, get a challenge, or maybe you think the matchup isn't that bad. My advice is to always go with the Airy page and then combine it with Resolve or Precision secondary. Resolve is slightly better because it lets you go bone plating and take better trades early on. You might be thinking, why are you giving advice if you don't play this matchup? It's because I understand how to deal with this matchup. The problem is how much you need to do to get anywhere. It's so hard to execute Aurora's side. And even if you play good or close to perfect, later on she's gonna catch up and she's gonna have very good impact, especially in side lane and maybe even in team fights. Comes down to execution, but the laning process is so uncomfortable that I don't advise it for anyone. With all of that in mind though, what can you do in the laning phase to make it easier for yourself? Well, the first 3 levels you're actually stronger than her because of your passive and the fact that you're a range champion, so use it in your advantage. Don't let her stack her passive as much as possible, and don't let her keep the stacks while trading with her. After she gets W, make sure that you don't dish out any damage on her so she doesn't negate any of it. Also, later on when she puts minions low HP, make sure that you're not staying near them because she can dash quickly on them and potentially even do a sneaky E on them and do a very fast combo where you don't even realize what happened. Just pay attention to her movement and the minion's HP. She always needs a minion low HP to actually gap close to you until later on when she can just dash on top of you. Try to get a lead before she gets her first back off, because then she gets Vampiric Scepter and good luck pushing her out of the lane and getting anything done. And the last most important piece of advice I can give you is make sure you're always unfreezing the wave. When you're pushing out the wave, make sure that you're staying with it and then you're pulling her out so she can't hold the wave. Now of course you don't always get the luxury because the enemy jungle will be topside, and that is why, and that's the main reason why this matchup is so bad, because Irelia is the queen when it comes to freezing, and if you ever get frozen on, as I mentioned earlier, it gets very hard. Needless to say, she's gonna go in the unplayable tier, but there are other champions that also deserve a spot here, so we'll talk about them later. Next up, Jax. Go for Airy plus Resolve and bone plating in it. You might be thinking, why Airy in a matchup where he can dodge auto attacks? The truth is you still manage to land a lot on him, since he generally needs to go pretty deep to trade, and after he uses Counter Strike, you're free to hit him back. Airy is the strongest lane rune due to it being up almost all the time. You absolutely need this rune setup to beat him early game. Needless to say, in that case, you need to beat him and farm a lead through the laning phase. Utilize bone plating every time it's up. Be ready to buffer your abilities as you're getting stunned. This way you're not losing out on DPS and you're not risking him dodging anything. Until he gets at least 2 items, as long as you're trading properly and utilizing your strength in the laning phase, you will be stronger than him. Due to this matchup being somewhat movement based, Jax is gonna go in the fully skill dependent role. Next up, Jayce. I already have an in-depth explanation on this matchup with actual footage. I'll drop a link here and in the description down below. I'll only mention runes here. You have a choice between Comet with Domination and Grasp with Precision or Sorcery. I personally always go for the Comet option. With that in mind, Jayce is gonna go in the opponent favorite role. Reason is, he's actually pretty hard to deal with even if you go with the Comet option. He's not as hard as Gangplank for sure, but it's still Jayce's favorite, especially because of the nature of the champion. Kayle, always go for Electrocute plus Precision. This matchup is not really a matchup. You just bully her as much as possible until level 6. Then you keep bullying her, but have in mind that now she has ult, so you have to bait it out first before you look for lethal. Every time it's possible, freeze on her. This way she's forced to step up and it makes everything so much easier for you. The only real danger in this lane is if the enemy team decides that strong siding Kayle is the way to play this game. In which case you have to respect a little bit, but still you need to find openings to put her behind. Kayle is gonna go in the easy role. She's one of the easiest matchups you can get in this game. Next up, Kennen. You need to go Comet plus Domination in this matchup. Play for priority and bush control as you would in any other range matchup, especially early on. Level 3, put 2 points into E and every time you have Mana Flow Band, proc it on him. Hide behind minions, never give him free Qs on you. The later the lane goes, the more dangerous it is for you, since after level 6 he can easily ON you. Be aware of that. Try to build up an early lead and avoid 1v1ing him later on. Look to have more impact on the map by being there before him. Kennen will go into the opponent favor tier. The reason is, it's actually pretty rough if you don't get a lead. He can at all times ON you later on, especially if he goes for a rocket build. It's also harder than the other champions in this role currently. Next matchup, Kled. Go for Aerie plus Resolve and make sure that you have Bone Plating. You could also go for Electrocute, but I would only advise that if you're more acquainted with the matchup. This matchup is all about not letting him attach his Q on you, because if he does, the trade is going to go in his favor. I advise you to always play with the wave. Look to never let yourself be frozen on, since you can look to player behind the minion wave and look for ONs when you step up. Aurora generally beats Kled early couple of levels in straight up ONs, as long as there's minions around. But later be aware that if you don't get a lead, you'll struggle to keep him down. Ideally, try to always look for either a kill or pushing him outer lane once you dismount him. Don't let him access to minions for free. Kled is gonna go in the fully skill dependent tier, and the reason is, it's actually pretty straightforward sometimes, but sometimes it's not, because it's up to the Kled player to make it chaotic for the Aurora, so it really comes down to mechanics and how they want to play out the lane. Next up, Malphite. This champion is pretty popular, especially for outfield players. They love picking it into most range matchups. In this matchup, you can go either Electrocute or Aerie. And while on paper it makes sense, the laning phase is not difficult for Aurora, because she can sustain the damage Malphite deals and fight back very easily. Abuse the fact that he's extremely weak without his ult, push him under tower, and harass him. Every time he steps up to throw Q at you, it's important that you're also ready to hit him back. Never eat Qs for free. Later on, try to build some HP from either Liandry or Banshee's Veil, depending on the game context of course, since if he goes a bit of an AP route, he can straight up one-shot you. Malphite's gonna go in the Aurora favorite role, and he's gonna be below Aatrox because Aatrox is a harder matchup for sure. Wukong. I haven't played this matchup interestingly enough. I'll put this in the haven't played enough tier. Nasus. He's basically a Kayle in terms of scaling, but also has a pretty strong laning phase. Really depends on what abilities he maxes and what runes he goes for though. In this matchup, you absolutely need to go Aerie plus Precision to abuse the Nasus in the early stages of the game. The more points he has in E, the scarier he is, so be wary of that capability. Similar to Malphite, try to not step up and eat his E without you hitting him back. Always stand in a manner where he has to choose between using it on you and the minions. Never let him have a shot at both. And in the laning phase, try to put him as behind as possible, since later on he can just run you down with his Wither and Swiftness Boots. You should also probably build Swiftness Boots yourself to negate the value on his W. Nasus is gonna go into a fully skill dependent role. He's an upgraded version of Kayle in my opinion the way he plays laning phase, but also he's much weaker than the other champ in this role, he's gonna go below them. Ornn. Pretty straightforward matchup. You completely outrange him and look to poke him down for potential lethal, since he can't fight back too much, as long as you play around his abilities. Go for Aerie plus Precision. Even though he doesn't have any built-in sustain, be aware that once he builds a component or two via his passive, he becomes quite tankier. Also, try to never get hit by his Q, since that will follow up a big knockup from his dash and a potential big chunk of your HP. Be ready to use your W to escape that situation and try to not get it cancelled by any of his CC. Biggest issue against Ornn is that you can't build Banshee's Veil, since it doesn't work very well into him. Liandry is the best HP item to go versus him if the game allows it. Ornn is gonna go in the Aurora favorite role. He's not that hard to deal with, but he's kind of a mixture between the two other champions in this role, which is Aatrox and Malphite. Another tank matchup, Poppy. Same as the Ornn matchup, go for Aerie plus Precision. Key things to remember versus her is that her W cancels your non-ultimate dashes. Look to save her across the Veil for after she's already used it. Also, staying near walls against Poppy is a no-go. Look to double check your position so you don't get a random stun. Lastly, her passive is pretty hard to deal with. Look to not let her have any grasp empowered buckler hits on you, let her waste it on minions first, and try to not give her any passive shield value. Poppy's gonna go in the Aurora favorite role, and she's actually weaker than everybody else here. Next up, Quinn. Go for Comet plus Domination. She's a range champion that generally beats most other range champions, but not Aurora. While it is skill dependent and later on into the game, Quinn plays like a fast-paced assassin, which Aurora finds hard to deal with, in the laning phase, Aurora should come on top, due to the fact that you have your E ability. Every time she goes for an E where she pushes you back, if you use your abilities in a straight line from her, they will almost guaranteedly hit. Now, sometimes the angle could be weird and they could end up missing, but very rarely. Look to play for bush control, be aware that she can scout vision with her W, and just go for lane dominance by abusing your strong poking capabilities. Also, one very key advice is, in this matchup, you should build Symbiotic Souls, since she goes for them as well. Also, she has very high tempo on her map due to her ult, so you want to be able to somewhat match that using the boots. Notify your team when she's about to go roaming. Quinn will go in the Aurora favorite tier, beating everybody else so far. Next up, Mordekaiser, and I actually haven't played this matchup at all, surprisingly. If I had to guess, he would go in the Aurora favorite role, but I don't want to give misinformation, so he's going to go in the haven't played enough tier. Next up, Lillia, and if I had to guess where to put her, I would put her in E0. I've played this matchup a few times actually, but it's been a while ago, and I still don't want to spread misinformation, so she's gonna go in the haven't played enough tier. Renekton, you absolutely need Airy plus Precision to beat him in lane. Renekton is a notorious lane bully. Aurora can match it especially early stages, but you need to space him and give him as less possible Q hits on you. You don't want him to sustain a lot. The one very important mechanic of Renekton is his slice and dice. Once he hits an enemy with it, he can use it again to dash once more. If he's ever going for a trade on you, make sure he needs to use both of his dashes to get on top of you, since this way he can't go in, trade and go out. He needs to stay and take the consequences of his actions. Also, avoid giving him an empowered W hit on you, and later on when he's level 6, you need to pre-poke him quite a lot to actually win an ON. Renekton is gonna go in the fully skill dependent role. He's kind of a middle of a pack kind of thing. He goes right below Kled and right above Jax. Riven, you need Airy plus Resolve for bone plating, otherwise early stages will be hard to trade with her, especially if she goes for Ignite. Take control of bushes level 1. You beat her during the laning phase, since she can't ever close the distance between you without eating a lot of damage in the process. And when she does, you already win the all-in due to the pre-poke you've done to her. Utilize bone plating. After level 6 is when she can look to straight up flash on you and look for 100 to 0 on your HP bar. Respect it and only go for safe and secure poke until you've put her at a threshold of HP that you're comfortable that you win if an all-in happens right now. This matchup can be hard, but if you go with the rune setup that I told you, most of the time you should come on top. Riven is gonna go in the fully skill dependent role. Next up, Sett. Go for Airy plus Precision. He is a dimmed down version of Riven when it comes to closing distance and also slightly less punishing if he gets on top of you. Thus, you don't need bone plating in this matchup. Space his movement, have an idea what his E range is, and always look to play around his W mechanic. This matchup can be pretty straightforward, but I wouldn't say it's a Aurora favorite. In my opinion, it's still a skill dependent one, so it's gonna go right there below Riven. Shen. Here you have an option between Electrocute and Airy. It really comes down to what do you want to achieve in this game. Do you want to stay and bully him and get the biggest lead possible? Go for the Airy route. If you want to scale better into the game, go for Electrocute. Depending on the game's context, both are viable strategies. The only mechanic Shen can use to beat you is his E. Understand the range of it and don't let it hit you as much as possible. Also be careful for a potential flash E. After he hits level 6, notify your team that he has it. Look to shove waves under his tower so you can get a lot of resources if he chooses to commit to ulting someone. Shen is a pretty easy matchup. He isn't as easy as Kayle, so he's gonna go right above her. Another champion from the ninja family, Akali. Go for the Electrocute route in terms of runes, because winning this lane is actually pretty difficult, so scaling better into the mid game is the best line of play. First couple of levels you're stronger, try to bully her and accumulate the lead through it. Whenever you face Akali, there's one ability that you need to always try and dodge, which is her E. If it hits you, you're probably losing the trade, or maybe you're even dying later on into the game. After level 6, unless you're very ahead, you can't win a fight against her without very careful pre-planned pre-poke. Avoid giving her a straight all-in with her ult. This is a pretty difficult matchup, but because she's not that strong early on, it's only gonna go in the opponent favorite tier. Singed. This matchup I actually haven't played, and I assume it's a very easy one, but because I haven't played it, I'm gonna just put it in the haven't played enough tier. Next up, Sion. Go for Airy plus Precision. He has a very big HP pool due to his shield and the way he will most likely build. While he can go more AD heavy, you shouldn't struggle against that variation. Try to avoid giving him proxy angles and also buy an early Dark Seal, since they will most likely go for good deaths. I wouldn't say Sion is easy, but it's for sure Aurora favorite, and that's where he will go. He's a middle of a pack kinda tank. Teemo. Another Comet plus Domination matchup. Surprisingly, this matchup is quite difficult. Reason is, he gets a ton of movement speed from his W and potential early boots rush. So hitting him with your E is fairly hard, since he can constantly walk in and out of range very easily. It really comes down to paying attention to whether he actually has an intention to walk up and trade with you or just baiting your abilities. Avoid the extended trades and look primarily for poke. Max your E ability, buy an early Oracle Lens, and honestly go for either Swiftness Boots or Symbiotic Souls, since utility is key. Teemo's gonna go in the opponent favorite here. He's tied with Akali for the same spot, but because he's more annoying, I'm gonna put him above her. Next up, Tryndamere. You need Airy and Precision to match the infinite sustain he has. First 3 levels, let him have lane priority, since Tryndamere is like a slot machine. He might get lucky crits on you or he might not, but we don't need to gamble that. Mana efficiency is key. Fully stack your mana flow band as soon as possible and play around Presence of Mind. The goal is to slowly whittle down his HP pool, especially after level 3, while maintaining a good wave position and not giving him any out-in angles. Turn around your back when you think he'll use W so you don't get slowed. Careful for his 2 combat-oriented summoner spells, and also kite him as much as possible throughout the whole course of the laning phase. While I could get away with putting Tryndamere in the Aurora favorite role, I'm actually going to put it at the bottom of the fully skill dependent one, because I think that suits Tryndamere more. Next in line is Urgot. Surprisingly, this matchup isn't difficult, so going Electrocute is the correct way. Aurora has the range advantage and has way too many escape tools for Urgot to handle. Respect him level 1 and take only control of the first bush. Do not risk a face check. Urgot should never be allowed to use his E on you, so keep your distance and poke him down. Respect his flash plus E. That's really the only way he'd ever be able to get anything done. Also, Urgot has a bit of a mana issues, so if you dodge a few of his Qs, he won't have any juice to continue trading. While Urgot isn't hard to beat in lane in my opinion, I'm still gonna put some respect in his name and not put him in easy. I'm gonna put him at the lower stages of the Aurora favorite one. Next up, melee champion's worst nightmare, Vayne. Luckily for us, Aurora can easily deal with her. Go for Comet plus Domination. And develop a poking playstyle. Don't extend trades unless it's on your side of the minion wave. Avoid giving her 3 hits of Silver Bolts, and if you can avoid giving her Fleet procs on you, even better. You should have no issues beating her as long as you keep your distance and always go for pre-poke before any 1v1 attempt. Also, one very cool interaction, if she ever tries to condemn you, you can use your ult to bounce, so depending on the context of the fight, it can actually help out a lot. Vayne will go on top of the Aurora favorite here. Next up, Volibear. You have a choice between Electrocute and Airy. Both are a good option. Airy if you want to have more lane presence, and Electrocute if you want to scale better. Matchup is very straightforward. Early level, let him get priority if he wants it, since his passive is hard for us to match. Throughout the laning phase, kite his initiation. Keep your distance from him. Pay attention to when he wants to throw his E, especially if he goes for some sneaky poke with it. After level 6, avoid going too low HP since he can straight up dive you. This matchup comes down to the players themselves. The better player is always going to win. It's going to go in the fully skill dependent row in the middle right above Nasus. Next up, Yasuo. This matchup is very difficult. You need to go airy plus precision. My best advice is look to always position the wave on your side, if possible of course, so he can't play the long lane. If it ever ends up on his side and you're not healthy enough to fully push it under his tower, or your jungle isn't there to help out, well, you're doomed. It's very similar to how Irelia wants to play out the lane, but there's a few things that make him easier to deal with than her. He doesn't have that much sustain, your E goes through his wind wall, and he still needs to actually hit Tornado to kill you, most of the time at least, unlike Irelia who can just after a certain point dash on top of your head and you're actually just dead. Also, one very important mechanic you need to use in this matchup in order for you to have a shot at winning is the pullback of your Q. Look to damage him from behind when he dashes into you. He's probably going to use the wind wall in front of himself, so when you pull back, the damage through goes through. Also, position yourself in the manner where the pullback will deal as much damage as possible. And Yasuo is going to be the second champion in the unplayable tier. He's basically just as bad as Aurelia, but I still think Aurelia is harder to deal with, so he's going to go right below her. Next up, Yone. And unlike his brother, he is missing one very important ingredient which would make the matchup hard, which is his infinite dashes. And while yes, Yone can dash quite a lot and all-in you out of nowhere, but he is not nearly as pressuring as Yasuo, at least not in the laning phase. Go for airy plus precision for more firepower during the laning phase. Pay close attention to how many stacks he has of his Q. Every time he's about to use the third one, he can look for some poke damage or potential all-in, combining it with his E. Basically a far range all-in, which is very crazy in some situations. Try to not give him any value on his W. Look to dodge it or don't use any abilities into the shield. After level 6, he can look to start off with ult and straight up 100 to 0 you. You need to pre-poke him to around 60% HP before the 1v1 commences. What can I say, I guess it runs in the family to be a nuisance to range champions. He's gonna go in the opponent favorite tier, he's pretty annoying but not as annoying as his brother. Next champion, Yorick. My advice is to go Electrocute plus Precision, not because this matchup is easy, don't get it wrong, but because accepting that it's a rough matchup and playing for a bigger impact in the mid game is the way to go. Yorick is actually a very good option to deal with range champions in general, mainly because of his E. Whatever you do, try to not get hit by it. It's a very devastating ability that later the game goes. It's generally pretty telegraphed, so you have to get the hang of dodging it. Also, try to always keep your W for his cage, otherwise it might get sketchy. Bully him as hard as possible pre-level 6. Afterwards, you can try to get near him, but never overextend. Look to carry through team fighting rather than 1v1ing. Yorick absolutely deserves a spot in the opponent favorite tier. This champion is extremely strong in the laning phase against someone like Aurora. Make sure that you have better movement than him and just wait for the mid game where you can shine. Next up, Gragas. Go for Comet plus Domination. Look to dodge his Q according to how he throws it and avoid giving him any ease into you. Always make him choose between hitting the minions with Q or you. Bully him early, since after he gets his first back off, good luck pushing him out of lane because he's gonna have close to infinite mana because his buy is gonna consist either from Lost Chapter or Tier, or maybe even both. Gragas will mostly look to step up when he has the damage reduction from his W. Avoid using all of your abilities into it. After level 6, avoid staying too close to him, since he might just straight up look for ON starting with his ult for a potential gank setup or just a 1v1 initiation. Gragas matchup comes down mainly to dodging abilities and hitting abilities. He's gonna go in the fully skill dependent role. Cho'Gath. Go for Airy plus Precision so you can actually push him out of lane, despite the infinite sustain from his passive. This matchup is very similar to how Gragas works in the Q dodging aspect. Look to avoid getting hit by as many ruptures as possible. After level 3, your poke starts hurting. Before that, only look for mana flow ban procs. Try to remove access to your minions to him as much as possible, since that's how he sustains back up. Freeze the wave on him. After level 6, if he finds a good Q on you, well honestly he can probably 100 to 0 you. Always keep your distance and keep an eye on his champion. Lane wise, this matchup isn't hard, it's honestly Aurora favorite and that's where it's gonna go. But later down the line, he can actually just run you down, so be careful if you meet him on the side lane. Tahm Kench, a very simple matchup. Go for Airy plus Precision so you have more resource to spam abilities. Look to annoy him by staying in front of minions so he can't CS with his Q. You're gonna sustain most of the damage back up with your passive. But if you do that, be ready to react with your W because he might try to engage on you with his own W. As long as you're constantly keeping distance from him, poking him behind minions when it's dangerous, and never let him have 3 stacks of his passive on you, you will never die. He's very similar to how Shen plays the laning phase, but he's slightly better, so he's gonna go in the easy road right above him. Next up, Quinn. Go for Electrocute plus Precision since you mainly play on ability sequences. Look to not go near her when she's 3 to 4 stacks on her Q, but if you have to, since eventually you have to poke her down, try to predict when she'll go for the E plus Q so you can sidestep most of the damage. Look to not get both of your abilities eaten by Gwen's immunity. A good rule of thumb is to throw them at separate times. Every time she uses her W, you can look to punish by looking for more longer extended trades. After level 6, if you're ever pushed up and she has Ghost, well, good luck because she might run you down. Just be wary of it and save an escape for that. While Gwen is not the most difficult champion to face, she's not the easiest either. She's very close to Aatrox in this regard. She's gonna go in the Aurora favorite tier. Olaf. Any room page works versus him. I personally always go for Airy plus Precision though, since I want to punish him earlier level as much as possible. The key is to almost never give him any axe hits, since he might run you down. Let him have early priority and try to play around your tower, since every time he steps up, he'll get chunked without any worries of you getting run down. Play around your TP and make sure he can't freeze on you. If you ever decide to try and kill him, make sure you're not getting baited by his life steal and W ability. Fully skill dependent matchup. It's very similar to how the Volibear matchup goes. I'm gonna put him right above him. Next, Heimerdinger, another Comet plus Domination matchup. Heimer's biggest weakness is champions who outrange him. Luckily for us, Aurora does in fact outrange him. You need to strictly play around your E-poke until you can put him at an HP threshold that you can O-in him. Of course, make sure you're never getting stunned by his E because that's when he can really fight back. Also, his W poke is somewhat significant, but as long as you're not too close, it won't hurt too much. You can find lethal on him at all stages of the laning phase, but after level 6, it's the easiest with a bit of poke beforehand. This matchup is fully skill dependent. It comes down to proper skill shot usage and knowing when to step up. Now, Camille. Notoriously in the past, she's done pretty good against most range matchups, but that's honestly a thing of the past. Nowadays, most range champions bully Camille and get outscaled by her later on, and Aurora is no exception. Go for Electrocute and Precision. This matchup isn't hard and you can absolutely go with a greedy setup. The things you need to do in order to win this matchup are play around her passive, pay attention to her movements since she'll stay around walls when she wants to engage. Use your E right before you're getting stunned by her E to create space and slow her down. After level 6, she has very good gank setup, so make sure you're jungle tracking. I want to apologize to any Camille main in advance for what I'm about to do. Camille goes in the top of the easy role because I really don't think this matchup is hard when it comes to laning. Outside of lane, of course, Camille outscales you and she can actually all-in you pretty easily, especially on side lane. But until then, Aurora beats her very hard. Next up, Darius. Go for Electrocute plus Precision. Very important that you take the control of the first push level 1. If possible, let him push to you, since he will most likely look to ghost on you level 2 if the wave pushes towards him. Now, there is a way that you can actually get the push and not be punished by it. Level 1, if he walks into you and you're able to get an Electrocute proc that puts him around 70 to 80% HP with an auto Q or something like that, you can actually start pushing the wave and play for priority. But unless that's the case, don't look to do it. There's no reason for you to ever end up trading your flash for his ghost or something along those lines. This matchup is very straightforward after level 3. Play with the wave, step up to poke him whenever you can and play around his E range. Don't ever get your W cancelled by his E though. This matchup is Aurora favorite and she should win on average. Dr.Mundo. Airy plus Precision to match his sustain throughout the laning phase. Look to annoy him the same way you would a Tahm Kench. Stay in front of the minions so he can't CS. Hard punish him early, because I'm sure everyone knows how strong a Mundo can get after a few items. Get a lead from the laning phase and look to have an impact with it. A very easy and straightforward matchup, at least in the laning phase. He's gonna go in the easy role right next to Tahm Kench. Fiora. Go for Airy plus Precision since you end up landing a lot of auto attacks. A very difficult matchup. I've played against good Fioras and bad ones and the difference is immense. This matchup's difficulty mainly scales from the Fiora's capabilities. Things that you could do to make it easier for yourself. Try to play around her vitals, don't give her any easy ones. Don't get hit by her repulse projectile, look for small trade sequences. Don't extend trades and look to have the wave on your side of the lane. I'm very torn apart on where I should put her. She belongs between fully skill dependent and opponent favorite, but I'm leaning more towards opponent favorite because she can actually go lifesteal and that's honestly the worst thing that can happen is if your opponent can get Vampiric Scepter, so she's gonna go there. Next up, Garen. There's only one word that describes this matchup, and that word is boring. This is by far the most boring matchup you can ever have as Aurora. You might be thinking, why is that? It's because you constantly need to hit him and he's constantly going to sustain with the most boring way possible. He just needs to sit back and wait for his passive to heal him back up. I can't believe this is still in the game. Anyways, go for Airy and Precision. Try to remove his passive every time you can. A cool trick is hold your Q pullback so you can use it a little bit later so you can remove his passive again another time. Make sure that you keep a high CS number. Don't overgreed on trading. Now, if you can get a kill, do it. But the thing is, the enemy champion, Garen, doesn't work on resource. This champion can be 50 CS behind and could be a level behind, but he still functions just as fine. Aurora on the other hand, she needs a high CS number, she needs kills potentially, she needs XP, she needs everything. The only way you ever lose this matchup is if you overgreed, you mess up somewhere and you fall behind. Start respecting him around level 6 and then after he hits his Strikebreaker. I hate seeing enemies pick this champion, but no other reason than the fact that I feel like I'm gonna fall asleep playing it. Akshan. Combat plus Domination is your rune setup. Play for at least 3 points into E, respect his level 2 ON. Almost all Akshan look for it. Try to have a poke battle with him. Avoid longer extended trades until you poke him to an HP threshold that you know you win. If he's missing, notify your team since they love to roam, especially if they're losing lane. Also, play around your TP cooldown. Big chance he has Ignite, so respect him early on even more. Now, I know it made this matchup sound easy, but it's actually not. I just wanted to be very straightforward with the advice. The thing is, this is a 50-50 matchup because it's really about movement and dodging abilities and it comes down to the wire. If the Akshan knows what he's doing, he's gonna make it very hard for you, but vice versa as well. That's why he's gonna go on top of the fully skill dependent role. Next up, Mundo. Airy plus Precision to match his sustain. Stack mana flow as soon as possible and play around presence of mind. Play up his phase as much as possible. Mundo can never kill you in the laning phase, unless you're just sitting in one spot and not moving at all. Keep your W for his pillar, weave in as many auto attacks as possible. Mundo goes in the easy role right next to my favorite champion in the game, Garen. Arise! Don't ask. Go for Combat plus Domination. Level 1 you can take very easy bush control since your Q makes you way stronger than Ryze in a ON. Level 3 though, he's stronger. Make sure you only play for poke afterwards. Don't stay near minions when he uses E and look to only get mana flow brand procs for yourself whilst not giving him any. Ryze is a very generic close range matchup. He goes in the Aurora favorite tier. Cassiopeia, another Combat plus Domination setup. You're way stronger than her level 1. Use it to go behind minions and don't let her touch CS. Throughout the laning phase, look to always play around her Q and the cooldown of it. As long as it doesn't hit, she can never really trade back. Go for 3 points into E, and if she's winning the trades, keep putting points into E and transition to a more poke playstyle. But if you're winning, start maxing Q. You need to put her as far back as possible during the laning phase. She's gonna go in the lower portion of the Aurora favorite tier. Warwick. You know the drill by now, it's Aerie plus precision. You need to have a lot of mana to bully out of lane someone like Warwick. Utilize every damage trick you have, like weaving in as many auto attacks as possible and utilizing a Q pullback. Stack mana flow band as soon as possible and play around presence of mind. Space him if he ever tries to engage. Only go for lethal if you're absolutely sure you can kill. Early Oblivion Orb helps a lot. Warwick is extremely similar to Trundle, but he's a slightly better version than him in laning phase. He's gonna go in the easy route right above him. Next up, Ambessa. Go for Electrocute plus Precision. Electrocute is getting a buff next patch, so it solidifies itself as the better option between Aerie and it. Bully her early on. Before level 3, she can't do much. Look to not let her auto attack you too much throughout the laning phase and try to predict when she will go for a trade with her dashes. Layer on her W cooldown, and after level 6 be ready to dodge her ult. She can ult it basically any time, even if it doesn't kill you. She might just do it for the poking aspect. This matchup is extremely difficult. Ambessa goes in the unplayable category. Now, compared to Irelia and Yasuo, she isn't that bad, but she still deserves to be there because of how many dashes she has. Xante, another tank matchup. Go for Aerie plus precision to be able to push him out of lane and have enough mana to do so. This is a very straightforward matchup. Bullying him as much as possible early, especially before he gets his first back off, since then he becomes quite tanky with the effective HP he has from his E. Speaking of which, try to not give him too much value on his shield and the damage reduction from his W. Pay attention to his Q stacks and careful for a potential dash into Q3. Xante is gonna go in the Aurora favorite tier. He's very similar to Darius, but if you make a mistake against him, he isn't as punishing. Next up, Vladimir. Electrocute plus precision because this matchup isn't very difficult and you can go with a greedy setup. Abuse your early game prowess. Get bush control and shove waves in his face. Make it hard for him to CS. One important thing is careful with your Q pullback, since Vladimir can actually nullify it if he goes in pull at the same time, so either use it instantly or after the pull is finished. Vladimir belongs in lower Aurora favorite tier. Now, he's borderline easy, but I still want to put some respect on his name because after level 6 and if he has Ghost and Flash or Ghost and Ignite, he can still find angles to kill you. Next champion, Zac. Aerie plus precision because he has no resource under his HP pool and also heals a lot. Look to gain the lead through lane. His only means to engage on you is from his E ability. Make sure you're aware it exists, especially if he's supposed to be in lane but is not showing. Try to step on his blobs when fighting him and avoid going low HP since he has much better sustain than you. Leandry and Oblivion Orb help a lot if the game allows it. Zac is very similar to how Vladimir works, hence he's gonna go in the Aurora favorite tier, but unlike Vladimir, he likes more long extended trades. And lastly, Fiddlesticks. I actually met a lot of Fiddlesticks top, that's why I'm putting him in this tier list. Go for Electrocute plus Precision. Bully him early on and start respecting him after level 6. Every time he uses E for trade, look to position yourself in a way where he can only hit you or the minions. Also, try to use your abilities right before he lands a crowd control ability on you. Surprisingly, Fiddlesticks is actually pretty scary. He's still gonna go in the Aurora favorite tier, but after level 6 he's a monster, so try to respect it. Alright guys, that was the end of the tier list. I have to be honest though, this is my second time attempting it. I didn't like how the first one looked, so I had to remake it. I hope it was worth the wait, and if you end up having any questions, let me know down below.